soft opening as I get everything,
Cool.
you know, set up and whatever. And then I'll tweet the link, and people will jump on.
Cool. I'll retweet once you tweet that out.
It's nice and informal.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Closer. Yeah, that works. All right. Grab the link. Hello, all you folks tuning in. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Immediately, a thumbs down. That person just don't watch. If you don't like it, don't watch, man. I mean, come on. You got Ben Noll here. You thumbs down in 5 seconds in. What a grouch. Grouchy. Let's see. It's the internet for you. You never know.
Yeah, a lot of keyboard warriors.
The power of the thumbs down.
That's it.
That's okay. We still love you, even though you gave it a thumbs down and we hadn't even started yet. You're going to miss out on the $10 million giveaway. Haha. All right. So right now I'm just tweeting and posting the links, and then we'll start here in just a few minutes, everybody, for April 15th. I need a social media person. That's what I need.
Do you?
You know?
Oh, okay. Those are those should be relatively easy to find.
Yeah, but I don't want to ask them to do it for free, and I don't have a big budget, so it's a weird, you know. It's like I know you can get
maybe a college,
right.
A college graduate or someone who's still in
right.
You know, sophomores, you know, junior, something like that, intern.
I know. I feel bad. Yeah, it's like I want to be able to pay. Hey, if it's I pay you $50, you know, a day for when something's really big and I need some help, you know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. All right. Because then I wouldn't have to do all this. Somebody else would do it for me.
Maybe one of your kids.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Ben, it's on the Twitter.
Excellent. All right, headed there now.
Let's hope that iPhone stays charged. And
sweet.
all right, I'm gonna go close the door and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment. Make sure the volume's nice and robust. Come on, TV. All right, so we'll get started here in about 60 seconds. Thanks for everybody that's joining in early. This is live from my daughter's bedroom in Wilmington, North Carolina. She's got the biggest TV, so I take over her bedroom, tell her to leave. But it works, you know, it works. And I've got a good guest today. I think you're going to really like the content, the background, the education you're going to get from this. You guys are really going to appreciate it. So before we get started, Ben, will you just give me a countdown from 10? You guys hear Ben okay?
Sure. We got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Yep. Everybody says yep. All right. Just check
Excellent.
Check the chat. You guys hearing? Let's see, so if I go like that, then we see Ben. And if I go like this, we don't see Ben. I can get my logo back. Whoops. That logo. That logo. There we go. Nice. All right, so let's get started, shall we? Got 80 people tuned in. More will jump on, I am sure. Here we go. Camera's over there, Mark. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Welcome to Hurricane University for April 15th. It was going to be tax day, but instead, people got extra refunds today. But we don't want to talk about that. That's negative. The coronavirus thing, double thumbs down for that thing, because this was supposed to be a podcast that I was going to put together over the weeks starting at the end of March through May. I was going to travel a lot, interview some people, put together a podcast, but everybody's grounded. We're part of the great global timeout. So be it. So we just adjust accordingly, and we work at home, people working at home all over the world, and I am no exception. Of course, I always work from home, so I'm used to this. I'm ready to go. So here I am live from my daughter's bedroom in Wilmington, North Carolina. She's got the 65-inch TV that I can use as a monitor, using the Apple TV screencast, whatever you call it. And it is my honor, if it'll pull up, come on, let's go. My something, there we go. Hey, if it works for Jimmy Kimmel and all the guys on late night TV, we can get it to work here. It's awesome to welcome my guest for this week, Ben Noll. Ben Noll Weather, you know him on Twitter. He is a quickly rising star in the world of weather social media. And for good reason. This guy is sharp. He tells it like it is. And there's no fear, no hype, no BS. And we really like that. You get straight to the core of the apple, as they say with Ben. He's well respected. And today, as this series goes on, we want to teach you something. We want you to learn something that maybe you didn't know before, to help you understand better this phenomenon that we call hurricanes, tropical cyclones. And so today we're going to delve into the world of long-range forecasting, what some of these concepts are all about. We're not going to learn everything. We only have about an hour, but it'll be a good primer for understanding some concepts such as long-range forecasting, vertical velocity potential, MJO, stuff like that. And the man to handle this, I thought that would handle it best for today, is my guest all the way from New Zealand, where it's a little after 8 in the morning Thursday. From the future, I bring you Ben Noll. Ben, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for that kind introduction, Mark. And yeah, in fact, it is 8:10 a.m. here in New Zealand. I'm in Auckland. where right now it's 59 degrees. So yeah, not a bad autumn day. Of course, the seasons are reversed here in the southern hemisphere, so we are now in mid fall. They call it autumn here. They don't actually call it fall. So out the back of our hurricane season now, which ends in the Southwest Pacific on April 30th. So yeah, I work for NIWA, which is the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research. So here in New Zealand, the closest, I guess, analog to the U.S. would be Enso. So we here at NIWA, we operate the New Zealand National Climate Center, and we do seasonal forecasting, climate outlooks, 3 to 6 months out for our clients and also for the public. Some of our clients involve government agencies, such as informing government agencies on drought and also tropical cyclones. We assist with the Pacific Islands. Of course, many folks would have heard of Cyclone Harold that recently tore through several islands in the Southwest Pacific. So we were actively monitoring that. So yeah, it's a busy time. We're out the back of summer now. There was a bit of a drought here and with the cyclones, but here today to talk more about the Northern Hemisphere, Mark, and what's going to be going on there as we go into your hurricane season and talking about that long-range forecast because, of course, the season's still a few months out at this point.
Yeah, well, I appreciate a good, so you're in New Zealand, but you didn't grow up in New Zealand, obviously, and we can tell from your accent, right?
That's right. Yeah, I grew up in New York State, so about an hour north of New York City in the lower Hudson Valley. So my younger years were spent in blizzards. I've now exchanged that for palm trees.
Right.
Probably a positive trade there, I'd say. But I do miss the snowstorms. I went to SUNY Oswego, the State University of New York at Oswego. I thought that was a phenomenal program. So if there's anyone that is interested in seeking out a school where you can really learn from your surroundings, given that sits on the shores of Lake Ontario, and it's really the laboratory is that lake because of the lake effect snow, and you would know about that a little bit more from your recent venture up there.
Yep, finally got to get up there at the end of February and the early days of March. All right, so hurricane season is approaching for the Northern Hemisphere. And with that are all of these forecasts that have been coming out. Colorado State University, Weather Bell, others, and even the University of Arizona. I saw that on the chart. You and I were talking about this before things got started, that Dr. Klotzbach tweeted about all the different agencies, private and otherwise, that are issuing these long-range forecasts. So let's talk about long-range and even medium-range weather prediction as opposed to, just the next couple of days, shorter-range stuff where we know an event is going to happen and it's imminent. We got watches and warnings. Let's back up before the watches and warnings as an example. What is long-range and medium-range forecasting based on, if we can start with that as a premise to go forward? What do we look at? Us.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so seasonal forecasting, you're providing a long-range outlook. I think outlook is the key word here. It's not necessarily a precise forecast. It's more of, okay, so will my location be wetter? Will it be drier? Will it be cooler? Will it be warmer? Given that we're talking about really long time scales, Mark, those precise details that you would expect to see, tomorrow's going to be 80 degrees and there's going to be a chance of a thunderstorm in the afternoon. That's not what we're dealing with in a seasonal forecast. Instead, we're looking at what we consider slow varying components of the Earth system. For instance, ocean temperatures. So what is the ocean temperature doing in the tropical Pacific Ocean? That's really important because that is the Enso phenomenon.
Right.
And we can use that to guide forecasts over the upcoming, say, 3 to 6 months because of the impact of those ocean temperatures on the atmosphere that sits above it. And, of course, those ocean temperatures can not only influence what's going on in the tropics, but also in the mid-latitudes and high latitudes as well.
So we've got this map. I've got it full screen. Hopefully people can see it. It's the coverage, 1989, 1979. Let's talk about that. The Pacific and our oceans are a big part of our weather machine, if you will. So let's go through some of these images that you've sent, and let's talk about the Pacific as a whole. Enso, El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon. Walk us through that, please.
Yeah, sure. So with Enso, that is short for El Nino Southern Oscillation. And it's this phenomenon that occurs in the Pacific Ocean. You may have heard of things like El Nino, La Nina. Enso encompasses both of those things. So Enso refers to this natural circulation in the Pacific Ocean, where basically, depending on the way at which the trade winds are blowing and how quickly they are blowing compared to normal, what you can get is an anomalous warming of sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific, that's El Nino, or an anomalous cooling of sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific, that's La Nina. And it all depends on basically the trade winds. Of course, the trade winds are these winds that blow from east to west across the Pacific. In some years, they blow a little bit harder than normal. That's what we expect with La Nina. In some years, they're weaker, and they can even reverse to westerly, and that is associated with El Nino conditions. So Enso impacts not just the tropics, but to a lesser extent, the mid and high latitudes. Here in New Zealand, for instance, we attribute about 25% of our climate variability to the phenomenon of Enso. And I'd say that's probably fair for many mid-latitudes around the world. So for folks watching from the U.S., about maybe a quarter of your climate variability could be associated with the Enso phenomenon. So Enso's been around for a very, very long time, of course, but over the recent century, we have seen a lot of advances in our predictive abilities and also identifying certain features within the Enso system, how we track it, and so forth, Mark.
So in the Pacific, there's an array of technology out there that has evolved over time, telling us about the state of the Enso, how the El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon is progressing, whether neutral, El Nino, La Nina. Talk a little bit about that, and I'm assuming that these first few maps here, that's what that's addressing, how that coverage has gotten better.
So this is looking at basically where the model is getting its initial conditions from in the ocean, the seasonal forecast model. And as we look from comparing 1979 to 1989 to 1999 and then 2009, what we see is an increasing amount of instrumentation around the world. So, of course, in the model world, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you're not providing a model with good initial conditions, then your output is probably not going to be accurate. So what we've seen over the last 4 decades is a large increase in the amount of data that's going into that initial analysis. And this comes from things like buoys in the sea. This comes from satellite-derived sea surface temperatures in some cases. Also, this thing called Argo floats. I'd say, if anything, that's one of the most important things. So basically, we drop this float in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and at certain time horizons, it drops down, and it takes a profile of the temperature way down beneath the surface. So not only are we monitoring the surface sea temperatures, Mark, but well at 1,000 meters depth, so very very deep in the ocean, deep and out of the ocean.
That's amazing. And so this has only expanded over the last 40 years or so. The data collection, the observations in to these computer models, the climate models, that's just gotten better over the past 4 decades is the bottom line here.
That's right. And with the data assimilation improving, we've also seen an improvement in the supercomputing power that we have around the world. So places, organizations like the ECMWF, the UK Met Office, Meteofrance, Environment Canada, NOAA in the US, all these places have highly powerful supercomputers, and they are using them to create seasonal forecasts that, go out, in some cases, as much as a year.
All right, so let's talk some rather basic meteorology. We know that there are circulations in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is a fluid for the most part, and you have ebbs and flows, high pressure, low pressure areas. And we know that a warmer Pacific leads to certain chain reactions downstream. A cooler Pacific has the opposite effect. Everything has consequences when large-scale features of our planet warm or cool relative to average, and even just on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about, in a neutral environment, let's say the Pacific is neutral. It's neither warmer or cooler than average. And let's talk about this Walker circulation and a neutral pattern and what happens to the Walker circulation. And first of all, as easy as you can, I know you're not a professor of meteorology, but how would you describe the Walker circulation to somebody in an elevator, and you got 30 seconds before you get to the top of the 26th floor there.
Sure. So the Walker circulation basically influences rising and sinking cells in the world, around the world in the tropics. Where we have rising motion, we expect an environment that's favorable for thunderstorm activity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have thunderstorm activity in one part of the world, believe it or not, that can influence weather all over. So those rising cells and sinking cells across the tropics have an influence at your place in North Carolina, Mark, at my place in Auckland, New Zealand. That's your 30-second version. We'll go into more detail.
Sure. So that makes sense. So the rising and the sinking, right, because the rising motion, of course, leads to convection, and the sinking motion tends to suppress convection or thunderstorm activity. And so to Ben's point here, when you have this large area of rising and it kind of focuses on a certain part of the globe, it can have an influence elsewhere, and even if it's thousands of miles away.
That's right. That's right. Now, I think the Walker circulation, of course, this goes back into the early 1900s with a gentleman named Sir Gilbert Walker. So this has been a phenomenon that we've known about now for a little bit over 100 years. And it's important when we're talking about Enso. There's both what's going on in the ocean and what's going on in the atmosphere.
Right.
And the Walker circulation covers that atmospheric bit. So if you want to know about sensible weather patterns, I mean, we can look at the forecast for ocean temperatures, and it could be headed in a La Nina-like direction like we're seeing this year.
Right.
But the atmosphere may not necessarily be in step all the time with the ocean. So it's very important, when you're looking at projections for sea surface temperatures, if you are a connoisseur of seasonal forecasting, to also look at how the atmosphere will react to those sea surface temperatures.
Makes sense.
You could someone's at the altar, but you're not ready for the vows. That could be the ocean, or that could be the atmosphere. And a bit of an analogy there, but that's how it can be. In a given year, especially if you're in a weaker Enso state.
All right. So, in an El Nino, what does the Walker circulation typically do, for the lack of a better word, and how does that negatively impact the formation of Atlantic hurricanes? It's good for people that live along the coast, but it has a negative impact on the ability of hurricanes to form. El Nino, Walker circulation, why is that against hurricane activity in the Atlantic?
Yeah, sure. So in El Nino, we typically see a rising branch of the Walker circulation over the eastern part of the Pacific. Right. And what happens at the lower levels of the atmosphere is you see a convergence of winds, both from the east and west Pacific. Mm-hmm. But then as you rise through the atmosphere, you see upper level divergence. And what that causes in the Atlantic basin during El Nino years is increased westerly winds.
Right.
And why is that important? Well, if you have increased westerly winds at those upper levels, mm-hmm. that can increase the wind shear through the atmospheric profile. So from the surface on up through the atmosphere. Yep. And that is bad for the formation and genesis of tropical cyclones. Basically, it chops their heads off.
Right.
For simple terms, you can't see that. What you want to see in a hurricane is good conditions for vertical growth, so thunderstorm activity. But you don't want those winds to be changing with height, and that is what can happen during El Nino years.
And so La Nina, I guess it's fairly simple to say that the opposite occurs. You kind of don't have that westerly wind component because, and let's focus on that. Why not? So why does the Walker circulation change enough in a La Nina pattern or cool neutral? In other words, no El Nino would typically mean more favorable Atlantic.
That's right, and I note that according to the latest IRI probabilities, there is a 78% chance that there will not be an El Nino this year. So in other words, we have either a neutral season or a lean toward La Nina coming up for this coming hurricane season. We'll get into that more.
Sure.
But that's important because the Walker circulation is modified in a certain way so that the rising branch is in a more favorable position for upward motion in the Atlantic, and the winds are more favorable as well.
That is, okay, so you guys understand that. So the absence of El Nino is a very big key here, not that you have to have La Nina, it's just removing the El Nino from the equation tends to lead to more hurricanes overall. It's kind of like bringing in a pretty good point guard or a center to your basketball team, it's not the complete picture, but if you were absent that stronger point guard or center or forward or whatever, and you bring somebody in, well, now the team maybe is a little bit stronger. It doesn't guarantee a championship, to use the sports analogy here, but it doesn't hurt your chances. And so we know, from studying this a long time, and all of you out there, you weather weenies, and that's a very good term of endearment. We like you. You know this. El Nino is usually not many hurricanes in the Atlantic. It doesn't mean we're off scot-free. We know that too. But the absence of El Nino tends to tip the scales in favor of more Atlantic hurricane activity. And we're possibly headed towards an actual cooling of the Pacific into La Nina. So the next thing I got up here is the NME, sea surface temperature anomaly. And I think I know what it means. Is it the North American Multi-Model Ensemble or something?
You got it. Yeah, good job. Yeah, North American Multi-Model Ensemble, Mark. And that includes a grouping of climate models from North America. NSEP participates, Environment Canada participates, NASA's in there, and there's other models as well that kind of go into this conglomerate.
Right.
What we create is a big mean or an average of many different models. And that's done because it increases confidence.
Sure.
Multiple models agree on a certain outcome.
Right.
Well, as a forecaster, that boosts confidence. And that's a way to kind of smooth things out as well. And we often need that smoothing to create the best possible long-range forecast.
So as we go through the summer here, and this edition of it is out through, it's the August through October time frame, which is the peak of the North Atlantic hurricane season, August, September, October. What is the NMME showing? What's it telling us?
Yeah, it's telling us that there's probably not going to be an El Nino, Mark, and we know that because of that cool tongue of water in the eastern Pacific. So west of South America, right on across into the western and central Pacific. And the other important bit here, Mark, is that Atlantic main development region, so a little bit further east. All you see are different shades of red there, and that means warmer than average ocean temperatures in the Atlantic. We have that now, and the climate guidance is suggesting that that's going to persist, not just in the Atlantic main development region, but further west in the Gulf of Mexico as well. And we know there have been some record sea surface temperatures there to date. Not necessarily saying that will mean that we'll see that as we go into the hurricane season. In fact, there's a lack of a correlation between the springtime sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico and then what actually transpires in the hurricane season. But nevertheless, a warm Atlantic basin is favored, and that means a lot, for our rising motion, as we just talked about in that Walker circulation.
So we have the sea surface temperature anomaly forecast, if you will, from these various models, and that translates over, and we can see, too, other parameters such as precipitation. And I really like your color schemes. In fact, Ben ingests all this data, and he makes his own maps. I really like that because I'm a map guy. Remember, I'm a geography earth scientist, and so I like the fact that he makes his own maps. And so we have a precipitation anomaly. We've looked at the temperature anomaly for sea surface temperatures, suggesting cooler Enso, warmer main development region, all positives for Atlantic hurricane development. Now we look at another parameter, and that is precipitation departures from average or normal. So what do we have there? That's also looking rather interesting.
Yeah, it is, Mark. And, in these precip departures, the green areas, those indicate above normal precipitation, the brown areas below normal precipitation. And where I'm focusing is that stripe of green that extends off of Africa and goes right on into the Caribbean. Because that is the main development region. So we see those African easterly waves, so these disturbances over Africa, come across the continent and emerge into a warmer than average Atlantic Ocean, and that's what the model is picking up. I believe, in that late summer into early fall time period with that stripe of green right off Africa. And then, once you get something going, Mark, in that region, that's on the weather time scale. Where will it actually go?
Right.
Well, it depends on the drivers at that time.
Exactly.
So if your area has a brown patch, that I wouldn't necessarily focus on that. What I would focus on in this image is the signal for above normal precipitation in that deep tropical Atlantic.
Right.
Not so much on the intricacies further north at this point. It's just too far out, and that will change from run to run. But probably what won't change is that signal for above normal rainfall.
Right. So the signal is there. This is kind of like, again, the sports analogy that the team is solid. You got a good solid team, whether it's basketball, football, whatever the case is. You got a solid team, and the projection is from the prognosticators and the sports analogy, well, Alabama's looking really good this year. North Carolina basketball, whoever. Of course, I should have said Duke, but we don't want to lose followers, but start clashing with that. But you get what I'm, Syracuse, right? Whoever. Sports and basketball and Hurricanes, that's a book waiting to be written someday. Maybe Ben can help me co-author it. But we try to put things into terms that you all can understand, and this is what it's like. It's like you develop this solid team with players, and then the projections are so-and-so team should do very well this year. And this is kind of the same thing, that we see these different players, sea surface temperatures, that's a player. Precipitation anomalies, whatever, that's a player. Other factors get put together. So then you say, well, what does it look like for the future? So then that leads me to sort of to wrap up this point here. This data is then suggesting what for the Atlantic?
Above normal precipitation and a more active than normal hurricane season. So that is it in a nutshell. And it's rather unusual, Mark, to see the amount of agreement, both from long-term forecasters and also the model guidance this far in advance. That's something that really sticks out. So certainly there is reason to be. I mean, every year we prepare.
Sure.
It only takes one, but there's a lot of guidance that is pushing in one certain direction this year, and that is toward a busier season. Of course, I hope I'm wrong, to be honest with you, but there's a lot that's kind of signaling that right now. That can change, but I think given the drivers that we've talked about, there's you can kind of put the puzzle pieces together, and there's not too many that don't fit. A lot of them kind of are fitting in the same mold. So as a long range forecaster, what I try to look at is, okay, how can my forecast go wrong?
Yeah.
And right now there isn't that much that I can identify where I'm like, okay, that might not lead to this outcome that I'm thinking of. So there's a lot of guidance right now that's kind of paddling in the same direction.
Yeah, and so again, the sports analogy, everything seems solid, you're going forward, but you cannot predict when Zion Williamson is going to bust his foot in the Duke Carolina game and screw up that year. You can't predict that. It's like, And so, for hurricane seasons, we looked at 2013 kind of early on, and it looked like a pretty overwhelming signal for a busy season, and it was just this weird anything but. And the differences are, I think we can go back and look, that's coming up on 7 years ago, folks, that weird non-season happened, and the modeling and other things have actually gotten better, that I believe that, and we don't know for sure, it's still just mid-April, but this doesn't look like the same setup even this far out as 2013, does it? I mean, there's more in favor and less room, like you said. You can't really see any reason to doubt what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I think if you pull up the velocity potential image from the JMA, do you have that one, Mark? I think that would be a good one to look at, as we can look at the different rising cells across the. Yeah, cool. So this right here, going back to the Walker circulation and to Mark's point, where can we pick things out that are different from those past years? So what we're looking at here in the green shades are more rising motion than normal. So enhanced lift, more convection, favorability for thunderstorm development. In the brown, suppressed convection, so more sunshine, less cloud cover. And we see that across much of that central Pacific and western Pacific.
Right.
And we see the rising motion over the western Indian Ocean and also over Africa.
Here.
So what that can do is invigorate those African easterly waves. This is a hallmark. This image in its totality is a hallmark of very active Atlantic hurricane years. So if we look back in time, assuming this is correct, it is a close match to those years that were very busy across the Atlantic basin. So at this lead time, that says quite a bit. It's different than 2013, 14, as you alluded to, Mark.
Right, and that's a very key component here, is that we do have the ability, folks like Ben, Dr. Klotzbach, Colorado State, they're able to go back and look at, evidence from the past and learn from that, hindcasting, to help with forecasting. And we have these analog years where things are analogous to the past and where we're looking at for the future. And these folks are able to put these pieces together, and it's not throwing darts at a dartboard and anything like that. There really is science to back this up. And the visualization of it, I love the easy, at least for me, and a lot of the folks out there, again, we call them the weather weenies or hurricane geeks, whatever, and that's a great thing. People engaged with the weather is a compliment. If you're a weather nerd, wear it with pride, because that's a great thing. You're in tune with what's going on. So that's a good thing. So we recognize these maps. They're called thematic maps. They have a theme, and this theme right here is screaming busy Atlantic hurricane season because of the sinking motion in the Pacific. That's the sort of that brown area right there, and rising motion across areas that would lead to stronger tropical waves and allowing that air to rise efficiently, and that spills over into the Atlantic basin. I think it's just remarkable that we have these tools. All right, so we see these players on the field, so to speak, ready to start the season, if you will, which is only 45, 46 days away. This is your fairly long lead time. Where does something like the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or MJO, fit in to this conversation? When will we start looking at that?
The Madden-Julian Oscillation, that is more of a sub-seasonal climate influencer. So we're talking about inside of 3 months, probably about 2 weeks to, say, a month or two. That is the sub-seasonal forecast window. And the Madden-Julian Oscillation is a pulse of cloud and rainfall that moves eastward across the Earth on a timescale of about 30 to 60 days. So basically, it's this area of thunderstorm activity that moves around the Earth, and it influences things like tropical cyclones, this severe weather outbreak that the Southeast would have just experienced, that had the Madden-Julian Oscillation's fingerprints right in it. And what we are seeing with that really warm ocean in the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic is perhaps the MJO favoring a certain area, geographic area of the globe as we go through the next several months.
Kind of settling into that area, and we saw that, and I'm just pointing this out. Don't read much into this. We saw that especially in 2005, 2010, where the Atlantic was so warm that the MJO, that upward motion, you remember there was instances, folks, if you go back and read the discussions from Katrina, from Rita and Wilma, they literally said there was almost no vertical wind shear in the atmosphere. And that's that large presence of just perfect upward motion and nothing to come and chop the tops off. Those seasons had a very pronounced rising motion. And Ben, didn't 2017, once we got into the heart of the season, kind of set up where it favored the Atlantic basin for a bit, giving us Irma, Maria, and even to some extent Harvey, that ended up, of course, in the Gulf. These are signs that we can see coming, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And you bring up an interesting point. Of course, with 17, we had to wait a while for things to get going. Now, Now, with this year, based on the things that I'm seeing with what we're seeing with the severe weather right now, we're seeing those pulses come across a lot earlier. So perhaps this is where this upcoming season may stand out, is that there may be some early season activity that we've seen maybe some of the last couple of years, but not a year like 2005 where it got going very early.
Right.
So that's been something we have not seen in recent years because there's been quite a bit of stability in the Atlantic over the early season. So I think that is going to be one of the keys to look at. Will 2020 differentiate itself in that fashion? And I think, it fits in with your points. It may differ in that regard to 2017.
So that's an interesting sort of keys to the game. Going back to my sports analogy again, what do we look for? And you might say, all right, well, if it's a sports thing, in the first half, we need to see this happen and that happen, and the offense do this and the defense do that. And if these things happen, then Team A is favored, okay? So what Ben is saying, let's watch June and July especially. And if we get main development region activity especially, because Gulf activity is not completely unprecedented, of course, in the early part of the season, but if we get strong, vigorous tropical waves that go on to develop in June and July between Africa and the Lesser Antilles, I think that could be the calling card that would signify a potentially very, very busy season ahead.
I would agree with that, Mark. And we know, based on research that Dr. Klotzbach did, that 85% of storms that form in phases 1 and 2 reach hurricane strength. And that velocity potential image we looked at earlier, that favors phases 1 and 2.
Gotcha.
So there's enough evidence at this point. The evidence is mounting as we've gone through this. We went through the various layers of the ocean, the atmosphere, the rainfall, and it's all, kind of pointing in that direction. We're not seeing that rising motion in the Pacific Basin. So, the typhoon season, that could be down.
Right.
And if that's down, well, somewhere else in the world is going to pick that slack up.
Right.
And it's either going to be the East Pacific or the Atlantic, and right now the signals are more tilted toward that Atlantic side.
All right, so Madden-Julian oscillation is more, like you said, around a 30-day time period of this cluster of thunderstorms, energy and upward motion that kind of circles the globe. It can maybe favor a certain area. We discussed that. Now, I've seen in recent years our good internet friend, Dr. Michael Ventris, I've learned a lot from him, this concept of the convectively coupled Kelvin wave, and I've seen more people in the weather, social media, blogosphere using that. Luckily, they just put the abbreviation CCKW. It saves Twitter characters, it does. So what is a convectively coupled Kelvin wave, and how does that differentiate between a Madden-Julian oscillation, if you can explain that in the elevator pitch, so to speak? These are some tough concepts, but they're important.
To use your analogy, Mark, my elevator pitch would just be using that Red Bull analogy. I think you used that last year. Basically something that will energize, gives a little bit extra energy. It's that caffeine hit for the Atlantic Basin, so to speak. But ultimately here, what we're looking at is enhanced convection, or a pulse or a pocket of favorability for thunderstorms and lift in the atmosphere transiting across. Whether you're talking about the CCKW or the MJO, they are very similar in that regard. So that ultimately is this favorability for a certain part of the world to have thunderstorm convection and cloud cover. And that is, I think, for the layperson, that is probably the about as much as you'll need to know about it in order to apply it to, say, operational forecast.
But it's interesting because it can be tracked, and I see you and I see Michael Ventris talk about that CCKW is coming. I would expect a possibility of uptick in Atlantic activity on this day to this day. That is remarkable because now we're talking maybe 10 days or more out, not just a 5-day tropical weather outlook from the Hurricane Center. We get a glimpse into the future. How is that detected? If you can sort of shine some light on that. How do we know?
Yeah, so we have different ways that so I guess kind of backtracking, what are the different parameters that go into creating an MJO? So how do we know an MJO pulse is coming to life? Well, there's certain fields in the atmosphere that we are looking at. That includes upward motion. We've certainly talked a lot about that. That includes the zonal wind at 200 hectopascals, so way up in the atmosphere. That in some cases can include OLR, which stands for outgoing long wave radiation, which basically tells us where there's increased cloud cover or not.
Sure.
And by strategically combining those fields, we can create the MJO, or you can alternatively look at those fields in isolation, and that gives you an idea as to what parts of the world may have rising motion, more cloud cover and thunderstorms at a time scale of, say, the next 15 days. And in some cases, the EC Center, they're doing it out to 46 days now. So we're getting signals on a subseasonal scale out a month and a half. I mean, this is groundbreaking stuff. We're in a bit of a golden age for subseasonal and seasonal forecasting. I tell my colleagues at work that I truly feel that climate is the new weather. We have, in a sense, we have weather in spades. I mean, of course, there are busts, but in a given month, you probably have 28, 29, 30 days where your forecast is spot on.
Yeah.
The climate space is if we can get for more and more detailed in that subseasonal space, I really think that's kind of the next forecast horizon challenge that we are all facing. And there's different people doing research all around the world. In fact, I'm in a project that's looking to use machine learning to further improve the model guidance that we're looking at. So it's kind of taking the machine, so in a sense, kind of analog based, and combining that with the model to create something that's even better programmatically. So it is a fascinating area, and there is so much to learn, so much to look at. It can be overwhelming, but it's quite an amazing area of the science at this point in time.
It is amazing, and to that fact, it's amazing that folks like you and Dr. Ventris, Eric Webb, and others share this stuff on social media. And I think that's a good thing, even if not everybody understands it, and especially those of you that share it like yourself with context. You don't just throw up something and put, oh my God, we're all going to die. There is a reason behind what you're posting, and you explain it, and it helps us to all understand the weather better. And I love that, because the less we fear something, the better we can handle it. And this pandemic, I think, has been a great example of that fear and anxiety can override the ability to make sensible decisions. And it consumes you to the point where you start losing time because you're obsessed over being afraid. But the more you understand something through education, even if you don't understand it completely, it can demystify it, whatever it is, whether it's a virus like we're dealing with, whether it's a health issue that you have personally, how do I conquer this? Or in this case, the weather. That we don't all have to be experts, but we can all at least have a working knowledge of what this all means. And I love the fact that I will go into, well, it's going to be a while until I can do this again, but we used to be able to go into Five Guys, and this is a true story. People are going to laugh, but I was in Five Guys when Irma was coming, and I remember hearing the guys behind the counter after I placed my order talking about it. And you could hear them talking about, oh man, did you hear what the European was, the ECMWF, the Euro was showing, and some other person was throwing something out, and I was, instead of gritting my teeth like, and I'm not a meteorologist, I'm a geographer, but I know enough. I don't look at them and go, you guys are making burgers, you don't have any right to talk about this. No. That's a great thing. They are absorbing this, they're talking about it, and I just think that you talked about the golden age. It does spill over to the masses through social media, and I think that's a good thing. And so how do you use your power, if you will? You've got a good following. When you put these information pieces out there, what are you hoping people take away from it?
Yeah, I guess, a greater understanding in a simple line is a better understanding of the atmosphere around them. And you pointed out that, now, we're really seeing is the public grasping onto these phrases, ECMWF, GFS, that we're all very familiar with. And ultimately, if you have someone, a forecaster or meteorologist, whoever it is, there are many that are not degreed in meteorology, but they're fantastic, wealth of knowledge. I mean, they, in some cases know as much as the pros do, and that, is a testament to now, having the internet and a lot of information out there. Anyone can learn anything. I know, never stick to one. You don't ever have to stick to one thing. You can feel free to explore everything that interests you. And I think, that certainly, fits in the weather and climate space quite well. But if you have, a local forecaster that you trust and has shown through their forecasting that they are, skilled and knowledgeable, whether it's a degreed person or not, it actually really doesn't matter that much. But of course, on Facebook, there are some Twitter even, there are some bad eggs,
right.
And you have to be able to filter through those and understand that, well, this person's, too much hype. They really don't know what they're talking about. And, if the person's forecasting, that'll tell the story,
right.
That, the actions speak louder than words. So will it actually eventuate or not what they're saying? And if it doesn't, well, you probably not want to follow that person's forecast.
Exactly. So a couple more concepts before we let you go. Ben has work he's got to do there in New Zealand. His day is just getting started. His hours on the east coast of the United States is kind of winding down. But a couple more things. So where does the science of long to medium range forecasting go from here? What are the next sort of frontiers to be addressed? Is there anything that you can put your finger on that if we had this, it could really make a big difference? And you can't say, we just need more money. I need something more concrete than that. Where are we going and what will it take to get even better? Well, we could almost see 10 to 15 days out, Texas is probably going to get a hurricane, or the Northeast is very likely to have a major snowstorm. But if you had 15 days, wow, that could be really amazing. How far are we away from being able to do that?
It is, and I can't put a finger on the exact time horizon, how far we are away. Eventually, we'll be going in that direction, and I think I'll tap on what I mentioned earlier, and that is with machine learning. So combining this dynamical model guidance that we've looked at today with machine learning, so learning from patterns that have already occurred. So you're trying to blending things that have happened in the past with predictions from the future into one very nice, basically concrete egg, if you will. Those, combining those two things together.
Right.
And I'm in a project right now with some very, very intelligent climate scientists and experts in computer programming. And basically, what we're doing is taking the climate model outputs and understanding what happened for us. It's in New Zealand. What happened in New Zealand over, say, a 30-year period when the climate model was predicting X.
Right.
And if we have deep, dense observations in our country, which we do for New Zealand, we can say, okay, so when model was predicting X, this is what was happening in Auckland, in Wellington, in Christchurch. And the intricate and intelligent blending of those two things is very powerful. So basically the next horizon, if you will, is how we take this climate data and leverage it with machine learning. I think that is probably the next area where we'll see a lot of growth with computing power increasing. That's really not the issue anymore. We have cloud computing. Some places still have a supercomputer on their premises.
Right.
We have one. So the computing problem is I don't think the issue anymore, but it's how do we reach that next step? And I think that's probably what we'll see, say, over the coming decade, Mark. This machine learning, artificial intelligence, those two, not catchphrases because they mean a lot, but those two phrases will become more household names, if you will.
That's amazing, and just it seems so rapid. I mean, the forecasting progress that's been made just in the last 5 to 10 years is remarkable. And this idea of, the machine learning, I know it sounds science fiction, almost like Skynet and Terminator and whatever, but, that aside, it's just really fascinating. And we look forward to how this progresses. So, that being said, we've talked a lot about the seasonal forecast. It seems that the agencies that are putting these out, and I know that the weather company will, IBM, Michael Ventris, they're going to put theirs out tomorrow. Colorado State has, Weather Tiger, University of Arizona, others, TSR, you name it. And the overwhelming consensus right now is for an active hurricane season. So is there anything that we can look for over the next month and a half that would be in favor of this happening? Yep, looks like it's going to happen. Or, that changed. Maybe things aren't going to be as busy as we thought. What are some keys to the game either way as we keep that sports analogy alive? What do we look for?
Yeah, so keys to the game. One, let's track the climate guidance. So is that consistent with the flavor that we described today, Mark? Is that going to be consistent next month and the month after that? So we're looking for that consistency in the model guidance. And then also in that sub-seasonal time frame, are the MJOs and the CCKWs, are they going over the areas that we would expect them to go over during an active hurricane season? And by looking at what I have in front of me right now, I did not send this one to you, but it's the 46-day EC weekly's velocity potential. And what I'm looking at here suggests anomalous lift, rising motion over the Atlantic. That makes sense. The seas are very warm, and then right over Africa as well.
Wow.
And those, if the positions of those cells remain as we go through the summer and into autumn, which really the signs are they will, that's telling a story, I think. So if we're seeing that now, there's a good chance that, this is a slow-moving phenomenon, so we'll likely see a persistence of that as we go through time. So those are probably the two keys to the game. Let's look for consistency in the model guidance the next few months, and also what is the MJO, what are the CCKWs doing over the next several weeks to month or two?
Right.
And do those, are those tea leaves that we can, read basically for what may happen in the future?
Did you happen, and if you can speak to this, if you can't because of licensing agreements with the ECM folks, do you know the, I think it's like the ACE prediction where it says, like they come out with a number and it says it's projected to be 80%. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I had a look at the maps, I think, just a week ago, and they are, I believe, it's quite close to normal for the Atlantic Basin. And what I'll say is that this time last year, we were in the same boat. So I believe there's actually published research, and I know Eric Webb, I've seen him put out a mention of paper that suggests this, that it basically underdoes precipitation in the main development region. So there may be a slight bias within that guidance that we need to consider, when dealing with the EC explicitly. Yeah. No doubt over the years it's had its share of successes. I mean, there's absolutely no denying that. But based on all the other factors that we looked at today, I think there is good reason to go against that or go a little bit higher than what it's suggesting. But I believe it's somewhere between 80 to 100% of normal what it's predicting right now.
Well, the last map that I'm going to show before I let you go is I think you call it your super blend, the ECMWF UK Met. And, the ECMWF is, for the first time in many years that I can remember, is painting above normal precip out through the main development region and into the Caribbean. The Caribbean has had a dearth of hurricanes, lately, which is great for them, but they've been absent. And then the UK Met, and you blend these together, this is, I think, it's not overwhelming, but this is really leaning in that direction, especially when something as conservative as the ECMWF has been. Here we go. This for it to be this robust, I think, I don't want to say alarming because I try to steer away from that, but we need to take notice.
I would totally agree with that assessment, Mark. It's not every year that we see not just this is what I call the super blend. So basically what I'm doing is I'm averaging all of the ensemble members from the ECMWF and all of the ensemble members from the UK Met Office. And these are two of the most prominent forecasting centers in the world. And that is the output between both of those centers. So you actually can't get this map anywhere else because I handcraft this in Python. So this is something that I make from scratch. And that is the output. And it is quite impressive, as you say, right on through the MDR. Yeah. If your region has a brown patch over it, you're closer to the, somewhere farther north, just south of Florida, it's not to focus on that at this lead time. That's those areas of green and brown will shift around a little bit, probably closer to the continental U.S. But that stripe, that tongue of green right across the MDR, into the islands is the focal point here. And don't ignore the plethora of green shading across the Gulf of Mexico as well, with the very warm sea temperatures in that region. So a couple of things here, Mark, that suggest that we need to be prepared. I mean, every year you're going to want to be prepared, but let's really focus the next couple of months. I know a lot is going on, but let's focus on getting ready for what might be quite an active season here for the Atlantic and maybe for the U.S. as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be working on a blog post for May that's going to address what I think is the most important hurricane season in American history, and people who have followed my work know that I am not a hyperbolic person. I don't put these grandiose, clickbait type statements out ever unless it's warranted, and there is a case to be made that for the United States and certainly the island nations, Mexico, all of the North Atlantic basin land masses, but the U.S., where there's 330 million people, that I believe this is the most important hurricane season. This has the most potential consequences if it is very busy and we get these major landfalls. And if we get a 2010 where most of the action stays out well east of the United States, okay, we can let nature do its thing and we don't get bothered as much, hopefully. But hope, as I talk about, by itself, not a planning tool. You cannot hope hurricanes away. Sorry. Just like you cannot wish for a snowstorm and get it. Sometimes you don't. So we do have to be ready. We got to be in that mindset. We cannot ignore it. I don't want to hear about it. We got too much going on. That is not the solution. But also, I'm not going to get a bullhorn and start screaming, it's the end of the world, this is it, this is, whatever. We have to approach this sensibly and understanding that we've got a tool here called long range to medium range guidance that tells us that it might be coming. Let's use that to our advantage and do whatever it takes in our own capacities, and everybody's different, to be prepared mentally, physically, and fiscally with an F. The money part, what can you buy? I know a lot of people are, and we're going to talk about preparedness in a later edition of Hurricane U, but this is what I'm talking about. We've got this gift. We know, quote, we know it's coming. We think we do. And so there's no excuse to at least not wrap our brains around the fact that we probably need to do a little extra this time because of what's going on to be ready, whatever that means for you as an individual. So before I let you go, anything else you want to add? I know you do these school closing stuff for New York, the Hudson Valley, your winter side. What is that connection there? Just kind of getting away from hurricanes for a second. You're in New Zealand, and you got a lot of fans up in the Hudson Valley. How does that work?
Yeah. So I'm, of course, based in New Zealand, working, with the Crown here. But back home in New York State, I miss my snowstorms, and of course, the Hudson Valley. That's where I grew up, so I have a connection there. And I like to forecast everywhere. So why not create this forecasting for school students? And I miss forecasting snow. They love snow because they want snow days. So let's combine those two things. What I do in the winter is forecast not only snow, but predict if there's going to be a school closing for the local kids.
Right.
And a lot of data goes into that. Of course, I think that the public probably wouldn't know kind of what goes in the back end of that. But as we've looked at today, there's so much out there that you can leverage to create interesting, cool maps and plots.
I love it.
It brings me back to being a little kid. You see that even though I'm not there, you see the nor'easter winding up the coast, and it brings back some great memories, from my younger years. And you never know, maybe I'll find myself back there again one day. Who knows what the future holds.
Sure. And you're getting married, right?
Indeed, we've actually had to delay that. I'm sure you could figure out why, as it's delayed basically everything else. But the hope is that sometime next year, my fiance Kate and I will be getting married in the Philippines, where she's from. So
how about that?
Yeah, exciting times.
Yes, it's and we hope that that I know it got delayed. You talked about that, but that's a wonderful thing. I saw that on Twitter when you talked about that in the recent months, and congratulations on that. That's fantastic. I wish the best for both
Thanks,
of you.
Mark.
All right, so that is going to wrap it up. Ben is going to get to work on his products that he does there in New Zealand. As I said earlier, his day is just getting started. Ben, thanks for joining us. We will certainly check in with you from time to time as the season gets here. If you're not following Ben on Twitter, it's easy to find, Ben Noll Weather, and I'll put a link to his Twitter in the description of this YouTube archive once we are done. Ben, thanks for joining me. I do appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, Thursday. It's amazing to talk to somebody in the future. I
18
like saying
hours
that.
difference.
Haha. All right.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Really appreciate it, man. And keep up the good work. Really like the work you do.
Thanks, Ben. We'll check you later on, buddy. See ya.
See ya.
All right, everybody. Let me get my ending. There it is. Almost. Come on. All right. There we go. So what a hopefully enlightening experience to hear from Ben Noll. In the coming weeks, this is every Wednesday, Hurricane U. We're going to talk about preparedness. If I'm going to, I hate to use the word alarm, if we're going to say that there's a busy hurricane season potentially coming, we don't want to just, how people go, I'm just going to leave this right here, on Twitter and social media. I don't want to do that. I want to say, okay, we're going to have a busy hurricane season. Now what can we do about it? So we're going to have somebody come on and talk about preparedness. And it's going to go beyond the typical stuff. I know you might be like, yawn, preparedness, boring. Well, we're going to talk about things that you may have never thought of, including we're going to have to address being prepared in a COVID-19 world. I mean, I hate it, but we have to address it. We can't ignore it. We will talk about mitigation, what we can do in the long term to lessen the impacts from tropical cyclones, winter storms, severe weather, you name it. If you're prepared for hurricanes, you can probably handle just about everything. And we're going to talk about insurance. And again, I know you're like, oh, boring. But believe me, you want to be prepared from the insurance side of things, especially in a year like this when a lot of us are dealing with some financial strains, okay? So we got to address these things, and I want to do it in a setting, we have no commercials, right? It's not like television where we're interrupted with commercials. We got no agenda here. We're just talking about what we all are passionate about for whatever reason, and that is this world of hurricanes. We are all connected. The hundreds of people that tuned in live today and the many thousands that have watched this in the archive, we're all here for a reason, and we're all connected, and I appreciate you tuning in. This is supported, by the way, by patrons on Patreon. I am on Patreon. I have been using this crowdfunding source for several years. It is growing. We are doing remarkable things, and it is because of their support that I am able to do this. It helps to support my family. It helps to support the field operations that we do. And so a big shout out to the patrons and our HurricaneTrack Insider members. The crowdfunding world is remarkable, and thank you for being a part of it. If you want to join that effort, there will be a link, of course, in the description of this video. All right? I am finished for now. In upcoming weeks, we will get into models. I got to find who I can talk to about models. Actual computer models. What do they all mean? I'm looking for that for next week. I've got some ideas. I'm just trying to get people's schedules to align with mine. But that's my goal, is next Wednesday we talk about computer models and hurricanes. All right? Thanks for watching. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Have a great rest of your week. I'll see you again next week on Hurricane U. Hey, there's Grey's Anatomy. The iPad turned off. I'll see you guys next week.